Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. And oh, how long have I chased rivers from lowly seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. 'Cause in the Highlands and the heartaches, you're neither more or less inclined. I would search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. I will praise you on the mountains. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valley, you're the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the Highlands and the heartache all the same. Oh, oh. Know how far beneath your glory does your kindness extend the path, from where your feet rest on the sunrise to where you sweep the sinner's path. And oh, how fast would you come running just to shadow me through the night, trace my steps through all my failures and walk me out the other side. For who could dare ascend that mountain, that valleyed hill called Calvary, but for the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valley, you're the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're my heaven where my heart is. In the Highlands and the heartaches all the same. Oh, oh. Whatever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move the mountains. Wherever I step, and if ever I walk through the valley of death, I sing through the shadows my song of ascent. From the gravest of all valleys came the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upward from a deep but empty grave. I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the Highlands and the heartache all the same.
Tonight, we're wrapping up our series going through the book of Psalms. The Psalms basically a bunch of songs that God's ancient people sung in times of heartache, distress, joy, sadness. anticipation, just like the way that we all do the same today, where we feel excited, or when we feel sad, or when we feel happy or lonely, like we turn to our favorite songs to get us through, or to hype us up, or to get us going. And we start off tonight with a song called Highlands by Hillsong. And so Cole and Selena, thank you so much for being here to lead us through that. We're going to come back to that song later. So special thank you to you guys. But wherever you are, if you're watching this live at a campus, or if you're watching this later, take a moment, just wherever you are, to stand. Go ahead. Yes, I mean it. Go ahead, stand up where you are. And tonight's psalm we're going to close out with is Psalm 130. And this is how it goes. So go ahead and where you are, remain quiet for a moment, and here we go. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord. Yes, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all of its iniquities. You can go ahead and take a seat. I want to focus on that verse 7, which again says, Israel, wait for the Lord, because faithful love is with the Lord, because great redemption is with our God. With him is great power to redeem. This verse will serve as the refrain for the week. So if you are challenging yourself to memorize the refrains from all of these weeks, this is the one for you. It's Psalm 130, verse 7. But instead of preaching today, instead of standing in front of the camera and giving you a 15-minute thing, we decided to do something a little different, as you can see. And actually, I want to introduce you to one more person who you probably don't know, but her work has definitely left an impact on your life, because this is Julia Morris. She is normally our wizard behind the camera, but today you have braved the elements and you are in front of the camera right here. You have to talk now. This is what it is.
I was thinking I'd just stay quiet the whole time.
You stay quiet.
Yeah.
Julia has decided to share a part of her story with us. And I'm excited about that, because so much of your story lines up with what this psalm says, which lines up with the lyrics of the song. And so we're trying to bring these things all together tonight. And so for everyone who's listening to this, I hope that this time together you feel a sense of encouragement. I hope that you feel as if you're being extended a hope lifeline if you need that in your life. Or perhaps this is just something as a way to give you a next step for your faith. So, Julia, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to be on this side of the camera. It's a little weird. So,
is this the good side? Is the rest of the good side?
Yeah, let me make sure I get all my good sides. Actually, every side's my good side, so never mind.
You're great. You're awesome. You're awesome. So I have some questions for you, but feel free to let the Spirit lead you during this time, okay? Yeah. We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but do your thing, all right? So let's start from the very beginning. Tell us where were you born? Tell us about your family. Walk us through those early years.
Sure. So I grew up in New Jersey, right, like literally minutes from the beach. Actually, if you talk to my mom, she would probably say that I learned how to swim before I learned how to walk. I don't know if that's true or not, but like...
Is that even possible?
I mean...
Is it?
Just toss the baby in the pool, see if they swim.
I don't know if that's how you do it, Julia.
Anyways.
All right. I don't know if that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I grew up with a sister. She was almost 2 years younger than me. And we grew up like super close to my family. Like we'd spend several days a week with my great-grandmother, and then, you know, spend weekends and stuff with my aunts and uncles and grandparents and all that. So.
It's like family was like such a big part of that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like even extended family was a big part of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, with any story that you want to share, there's probably some sort of ebb and flow, some highs and lows. Like what happens early on in your life, and how does your family start to kind of tear apart in that way?
Sure. So I think actually a lot of people can probably relate to this next part of my story. My parents were fighting pretty regularly. Oftentimes like my father would stay out really late, come back like 4 or 5 in the morning. And I really didn't know him as a father. He hadn't like stepped in the ways that a father should, or fathers do. A lot of fathers do. So I think my mom tried to shield me from that, me and my sister from that a lot. But it's impossible to avoid everything.
Sure.
And as I got older, I started to see more and more through the cracks and more glimpses of what was actually happening. So finally it all culminated one night when my parents kind of sat me down and said, we're getting a divorce. And obviously like it's hard for any kid to hear, but I don't think my 5-year-old self really knew like the full extent of that, like what it actually meant.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think I finally started to understand a little bit more when that question was asked of me of like, would you like to stay with your mother or would you like to stay with your father?
That must have been really difficult. Not to understate it, just as a 5-year-old, like having to choose a parent and just the disappointment that feels and all the emotions I'm sure you didn't even begin to even articulate or understand as an elementary school kid.
Yeah, it was difficult, and I mean it only continued to kind of spiral a little bit, I guess. My father, he ended up selling the house without my mom's knowledge, and so there was kind of like that moment of like, I guess, panic of like, what are we gonna do? And my aunt, she actually lived here in Maryland at the time, she still does, and we just decided to come stay with her for a while. She invited us into her house until we just kind of got back on our feet. So that's when we kind of made the move from New Jersey to Maryland. But early on, we decided to try out this little church called Mountain Christian Church.
Oh, heard of it?
Really? Yeah. I thought it was too tiny.
It's a little small church down the road.
Yeah. Anyways, we decided to try coming here to Mountain, and my mom got plugged in with the worship team pretty early on, and because the realities of living with a single parent, like my sister and I were dragged to like every single rehearsal, just full on late nights here at Mountain. And I was actually going to school here at the time too, so it was like full 6-day weeks.
So you had your church, it was your school, it was your daycare, it was everything. Just
it was
6 days a
everything.
week here at Mountain.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
But what was really cool is I got to see my mom like serving really early on, and I think that really shaped my view of like who God was and who God is early on in my life, and I'm really grateful for that experience.
Yeah, and there are some ways that you had some difficulties, and what happened is the church body kind of circled around your family, and you have a really powerful story of a moment where some folks at Mountain really stepped into your life in a really cool way.
Yeah. I mean, I remember specifically this one story of a father-daughter dance. It was at elementary school, and
do you remember about how old you were? Like 6, 7?
I was probably like a little bit older. I was probably like 8 or so.
8 or so. Okay.
I was set to go to the father-daughter dance with my father. He was going to drive down from New Jersey to be with us for that day. And so my sister and I were like so excited. We were just so stoked. It was all we could talk about. And then a couple hours before, we get a call from my father who had said he wasn't going to be able to make it. Like he didn't make it a priority, forgot about it, whatever it was. But he wasn't able to be there.
That's tough.
And something really cool that happened was a couple of men from Mountain stepped in and brought us to the father-daughter dance.
That's awesome.
And just like a few hours notice. So like I've had a lot of circumstances and a lot of instances like that where men at Mountain have really stepped up and shaped my view of like what a godly man looks like.
Praise the Lord. That's great. Julia, so much of what you're saying reminds me of a line from the chorus of Highlands, and we're gonna have Cole and Selena go into that here in just a moment. So as you all listen to them sing the chorus of this song, think about the words they're singing, and we'll come right back to that here in just a moment.
I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valley all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache all the same.
The very first line of that chorus says, I will praise you on the mountain, so in our highest of highs, but I also praise you when the mountain's in the way, when we just like feel like we can't get around this mountain. We're just so succumb to it. Psalm 130 would say it this way: my whole being hopes and I wait for God's promise. My whole being waits for the Lord. Julia, there's a part of your story that is clearly bad, but you saw the ways that God was showing up in and around your family and in your life, and you clung on to that, and you saw the church being the church in a really meaningful way. And in parts of your earlier years, you were both on the mountaintop and obviously being really overwhelmed by the mountain in the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really indicative of like life itself. There's always going to be the highs. There's always going to be the lows. It's not as simple as one or the other.
Yeah. So keep moving through your story. Just like you said, life's not the same. It's ebbs and flows. There's ups and downs. Take us through like the next 10 or so years, middle school, high school. What starts to shift in your family, and tell stuff.
Yeah. That's a lot of time. So.
Well, we got a little bit of time, so. Chop.
Okay, no pressure.
No pressure. No, you're doing great.
Yeah, I mean, I shared that story about the father-daughter dance, and something that's actually really cool is the next year, for the father-daughter dance, like I actually got to go with my stepfather. He wasn't my stepfather at the time, but like he would then become my stepfather, I think, the next year.
That's awesome.
And you know, like, this was a man that like my mom had met, I guess pretty soon after moving to Maryland, and like those early years with him were really awesome. Like he was like a big history buff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And in high school, like I was homeschooled, so our field trips were like, let's go to Gettysburg, let's go to Antietam, like, and it was like kind of nerdy, but it was also like really fun to be able to share something with him that he was like really passionate about. He cared enough to show it in his everyday actions, to show it in the ways that he stepped in, to be with us in those moments. And like he had shown throughout this time, like time and time again, that he would continue to step up when the going would get tough. So I don't know, I look back on those times really fondly, like those early years. But as we know, you know, there's life isn't as simple as the highest high or the lowest lows. And in 2014, I think it was this year I graduated high school, my stepfather, he had a stroke that changed his personality pretty drastically. And you know, around the same time, like I was going through like a lot of mental health struggles, and this really lovable, like soft-spoken, really kind guy, really passionate guy that I knew, transformed into this aggressive, angry, two-faced man. And it's just a slow decline of as his mental state and his personality started to decline. Like he essentially became like a stranger, just like living in my house. And you know, I was angry. Like, sure. I was angry for my mom, who like had to kind of step out of the role of a wife to her husband and into the role of a caretaker. I was angry for my sister because, my stepdad and my sister would get into pretty regular screaming matches. And I was angry for myself, like just the loss of one of the only men that I knew had stepped in this awesome way to slowly declining into this other person. And I kind of found myself asking a lot, like, God, why are you putting me through this again? Why are you putting us through this again? And all the while, like, I kept trusting, I kept hoping, I kept praying, but, it was tough. Like, I was angry, but I could still acknowledge that God had a bigger plan that he was working in my life.
Wow. There's some powerful words you said there and what you chose to do and how you chose to respond. And there's some powerful words towards the end of the song Highlands that we'll have Cole and Selena get back into the next portion of the song. But before they sing that, I want everyone who's watching this just to take a moment and consider the valleys of your own life. The valleys that you've experienced in the past. Maybe the valleys that are coming up, or maybe the valley that you're currently in. Now, how do you respond to tragedy, to depression, anxiety, failed relationships? How do you respond to your difficult family situations? How do you respond in the ways where you know that you failed? And as you're thinking about that, I want you to consider the lyrics of the next part of the song, starting with the bridge.
Whatever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move the mountains. Wherever I stand, and if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent. From the gravest of all valleys come the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upward from a deep but empty grave.
That line wherever I walk through the valley of death, I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent. Now, what describes in Psalm 130, it speaks to this. Like when you're someone who has the refrains of God on your heart, when you're someone who chooses to sing the songs that God has for us, we respond to situations differently than if we didn't. We respond with praise. We respond with singing through shadows. It's quite a desperate image. You want to think about singing through the shadows, like that mental image to me is like a daunting, like lonely, isolating place. But there's something about that confidence that you would have, or the dedication, or the assurance. Like, I don't know what it is, but I want that. I want that for me. I need that. Julia, your story with your stepdad ends a little tragically. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my stepdad, he had a whole host of health issues, and a lot of them, like, undiagnosed, some of them diagnosed, but at the end of the day, like, he didn't really take care of any of them. He didn't make that as a priority. So in 2020, he passed away.
And so when you walk through those valleys, as you saw the deterioration of, the father figure you had slipping into this person you didn't know, and ultimately they pass away, your family went through it again, and like so many of our families just keep going through the valleys. And what I love how your story kind of wraps up and where you are now is just you simply still chose. sometimes quite literally chose to praise because you played music all the time.
Sure.
But like, as you look back on the stuff you're going through, and like, where do you see God? Where do you see those fingerprints of God on those spaces in your life, on those circumstances?
Yeah. I mean, I really like, music has always been a really big part of my life, a really big part of my story. And so even in those moments where it was tough to come back to praise, come back to worship, like, in the end I chose music. My musical outlet was worship, was praising, and I knew that coming back to God would only bring more fruit in my life. And something that I hadn't mentioned that's kind of like a big part of that is just like my mental health. Obviously the external circumstances didn't really help my situation, and kind of cards stacked against me. It was a lot of genetic stuff, but I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety in my middle and high school years. I still struggle with it to this day. And so I mean, it's tough, because when you're looking back at that, when I'm looking back, I find moments like where I'm asking myself, like, why am I going through this? Asking God why I'm going through this. And I'm just starting now to see little bits of God redeeming that in my life. Like, I lead a group of middle and high school girls. Shout out to the Edgewood, high school and middle school girls group.
Dude, they're going nuts right now.
I hope so. Girls, you better be like screaming and going crazy right now, because otherwise you're making me look bad.
What if they were making you look bad? That'd be mean.
Shame.
That'd be mean.
Anyways, I lead a group of middle and high school girls at the Edgewood campus, and it is so awesome to see the ways that, like, my story is relating to theirs, and I'm kind of able to, like, speak to them as somebody who is, like, kind of gone through the darkest moments, a lot of stuff that they're struggling with, and, like, look back at the other side from them and say, here's what helped me, here's how I can help you, and here's how you trust God in this moment, like, because it's tough.
Yeah. Julia, one final question for you. What is one final piece of encouragement that you would give to anyone who's listening who is currently on the other side of that pain? They're still early on in that pain. They're still looking up at the mountain, and it's looking as if there's no way to get through it. There's no way to get over it. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say biggest piece of advice I can give is to surrender your need to know what's coming next. Like, there's so much more to life than what we can see that's directly in front of us. And if we believe that God is in control, we can be free to trust that God has what's best for us in mind. I mean, there's always a plan, and that plan for me might not have necessarily been like my parents stay together and we live an awesome life in New Jersey and go to the beach every day and blah, blah, blah. Like, God's plan for me is still unfolding in my life. And God has a plan for everyone. That if we are able to trust Him enough to just hang on for the ride, He's gonna do something awesome in our lives.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned too, and we'll end on this, is like you're 25, and like you're learning things now that related to like a dozen or plus years ago, that you're starting to see, oh, I get it now.
Mm-hmm.
I know why I went through that. Oh, I know why this happened, because now I can move forward and serve the Lord and reach back to those who are back where I was and kind of carry them forward.
Yeah.
And I love that image of just, we get so bogged down in thinking that, like, hey, you know what I'm going through right now, it's like the worst, the most difficult portion, and like this is all my life is. It's like, wait, hold on. There's so much more to life in the future. This is just a blink. And thinking about what that future looks like, if you endure, if you wade through it, if you remember the refrains of God, if you trust in God's promise, there's more to come.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Julia, thank you.
Yeah.
This was so meaningful. And honestly, for each and every one of you, and we'll close here, I guess there really is one question for you to consider. At what point in your life Are you willing to choose to praise? Now, whether you're on the mountaintop or whether you're in the valleys low, if the mountain's in your way, we wait for the Lord because of God's promises. And there are so many. There's so many things that God promises us, like that God will always be with us, that God will never forsake us, that God will give us meaning and purpose and joy and love and peace. And God desires to give us all the things we need. So as we close this time together, I want to invite everyone again, wherever you are, if you're watching this now at your campus or if you're watching this later online, stand where you are. And I want to give you the opportunity to respond with praise. Cole and Selena are going to lead us one final time through the chorus of the song. And I invite you to sing. I invite you to sing loudly. I invite you to sing softly. I invite you to sing quietly in your mind. Close your eyes, whatever that is. I invite you to respond with praise. Take it away, friends.
I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartaches all the same.